What would you do if the voices of your loved ones called you, but they weren't really alive? In the remote, snow-covered forests of white pine, a group of friends reunites for what was supposed to be a simple getaway. But beneath the frozen silence lurks something ancient, a flesh-harvesting entity that mimics voices, builds itself from its victims, and turns the snow itself into a hunting ground. As the blizzard closes in, survival becomes a brutal race against an unspeakable horror that doesn't just kill, it absorbs. The tires crunched over the frozen gravel as Mark Dawson tightened his grip on the steering wheel, the old Chevy pickup growling under the weight of 7 people in their winter gear. The towering pines on either side of the narrow forest road leaned inward, as though whispering secrets lost to the swirling Montana winds. Snow flurries danced in the air like drifting ash, and with each passing mile, the world outside grew wider, colder, and more isolated. Sitting beside him, Claire Reynolds gazed out the window, her breath faintly fogging the glass. Mark allowed himself a brief glance toward her, the way her auburn hair glowed softly in the pale afternoon light, how her fingers nervously tapped against her thermos. She had always possessed that quiet grace, the kind that drew people in without effort. And yet, even after all these years, Mark had never found the courage to tell her how he truly felt. In the back seat, Ethan's voice broke through the silence, loud and brash as always. "Man, this is perfect. 10 years, huh? Can you believe it? Finally, the Great White Pine reunion." Ryan chuckled, nudging his younger brother Jason. "Yeah, until one of us gets eaten by a bear or freezes to death. You know how these woods are." Jason rolled his eyes. "Relax, we're staying in a cabin. It's not like we're camping out in the open." In the bed of the truck, Emily hugged her heavy parka tighter, her breath turning into thick plumes in the freezing air. She exchanged a brief smile with Mr. Anderson, their former history teacher, the man who had orchestrated this entire trip. Mr. Anderson, now nearing 60 but still possessing that calm, steady presence, looked around the surrounding forest with quiet familiarity. "Keep your eyes open," he said gently. "White Pine doesn't forgive carelessness." The name itself carried weight. White Pine National Forest stretched for hundreds of miles, blanketing the remote regions of Montana. Isolated, nearly forgotten, and steeped in old stories that the locals in Aspen Creek only whispered when the sun went down. Stories about people who vanished. The journey had been long, winding its way through frozen valleys and mountain passes. Mark had heard the warnings before they left. Locals at the diner shaking their heads, muttering about an incoming storm. "White Pine doesn't like visitors," one of them had said, eyes narrowing. Mr. Anderson had brushed it off as superstition. "Every forest has its legends," he'd said. "That's what makes it exciting." But even Mark couldn't shake the unease that crept under his skin as they pressed deeper into the woods. The sky had darkened unnaturally early that afternoon, casting the landscape into a blue-gray dimness. Finally, after nearly 5 hours on the road, they reached the cabin. The structure stood proudly amidst a small clearing, 2 stories high with sturdy timber walls weathered by countless winters. Icicles hung like knives from the eaves, and a thin plume of smoke rose from the chimney, courtesy of the advanced preparation made by Anderson's old friend Robert, a forest ranger who was supposed to meet them later. The group spilled out of the truck, their boots crunching in the knee-high snow as they hauled bags and boxes toward the cabin's heavy front door. Mark was immediately struck by the eerie stillness. No birds, no distant sounds of wildlife, just the relentless whisper of wind threading through the trees. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly well maintained. A large stone fireplace dominated the main living area, casting flickering warmth over the rustic wooden interior. Antlers, hunting trophies, and old maps of the national forest decorated the walls, giving the place a rugged charm. Long wooden tables sat ready for meals and games. A stack of board games and an old record player sat in the corner, like relics from a simpler time. "This is incredible," Emily whispered, running her gloved fingers along a bookshelf full of dusty tomes. "Beats any hotel we could afford," Ethan added with a grin, already digging through the liquor stash someone had thoughtfully stocked. Anderson set his duffel bag down near the fireplace. "Make yourselves at home, everyone. Robert said he might join us tomorrow if the weather holds." Tonight, hours passed in a haze of laughter, old stories, and clinking glasses. Mark watched Claire from across the room as she smiled politely at Jason's jokes, occasionally brushing strands of hair from her face. The heat from the fireplace brought a soft glow to her pale cheeks. "Mark, you with us?" Ethan called, slapping his shoulder. Mark blinked, shaking off his daze. "Yeah, just enjoying the peace and quiet." Claire turned and smiled at him. "Good to see you again, Mark." Those few words, though simple, warmed him far more than the fire ever could. As the evening wore on, the wind howled louder outside. Snow fell in thick sheets, tapping against the cabin windows like skeletal fingers. The storm had arrived. Just after midnight, Mr. Anderson suggested they turn in early before the blizzard worsened. "Tomorrow we'll hike a bit, maybe explore around the clearing, but get some rest. We'll need it." The group began dispersing to their assigned rooms upstairs, their footsteps creaking on the old wooden staircase. Mark volunteered to help Ethan gather extra firewood before heading to bed. They bundled up and stepped outside into the bitter cold. The forest was a different world at night. The towering pines swayed as the wind howled like distant screams. The snow reflected the moonlight faintly, casting long shadows that danced across the clearing. Mark and Ethan moved toward the small woodpile beside the cabin, their breath visible in the freezing air. That's when Ethan froze. "Hey, do you see that?" Mark turned. Just beyond the tree line, partially illuminated by the porch light, stood a snowman. But it wasn't one they had built. Its proportions were wrong. Taller, leaner, with elongated stick arms stretching downward unnaturally. Instead of the usual carrot nose, a short, broken branch jutted from its face. Black lumps of what appeared to be coal formed a crude smile and hollow eyes. Perched atop its head sat a gray woolen cap, identical to the ones issued to the forest rangers. Mark felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the wind. That wasn't here before. "Could have been a joke," Ethan said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe Ryan and Jason made it while we were inside." Mark shook his head. "It's too close. If they made it earlier, we would have seen it when we arrived." They both stared in silence as the wind stirred loose snow around the figure's base. For a moment, Mark thought he saw a faint trail, a shallow groove stretching behind the snowman, vanishing into the woods, like something had been dragged. His stomach tightened. "Let's head back," he whispered. Neither of them spoke another word as they hurried inside, locking the cabin door behind them. The warmth of the cabin enveloped them as soon as the door shut behind. Mark pulled off his gloves, flexing stiff fingers while Ethan rubbed his arms vigorously, trying to shake off the unease clinging to his skin like a damp fog. No one else seemed aware of what they had just seen. Ryan and Jason were upstairs, their muffled laughter echoing faintly through the timber beams. Emily was curled up by the fire, leafing through an old hunting magazine. Claire sat in the corner, sipping tea, her gaze distant, as if already sensing something wasn't quite right. Mr. Anderson glanced up from unpacking supplies and smiled. "All set out there, boys?" Mark forced a nod. "Yeah. Got enough firewood for a few days." Ethan chimed in quickly. "The storm's picking up though, real heavy wind." Mr. Anderson's face turned serious. "It'll pass, they usually do. We'll stay put, keep the fire going. No point getting anxious before there's a real problem." Mark noticed Ethan exchanging a brief glance with him but said nothing. There was no point in alarming everyone. Not yet. Later that night, as everyone retreated to their rooms, Mark remained downstairs by the fireplace. The flickering flames did little to settle his nerves. His mind replayed the image of the snowman, its unnatural proportions, the misplaced branch nose, and especially that hat, the forest ranger's hat. Robert's supposed to meet us tomorrow. The thought lingered like a splinter under his skin. Claire reappeared quietly, a blanket draped around her shoulders. She sat beside him without saying a word, her presence unexpectedly calming. Mark glanced at her. "Couldn't sleep?" She shook her head, her voice soft. "Storm's too loud," she hesitated before adding, "Something feels off about this place." He debated whether to tell her what he and Ethan saw, but ultimately decided against it. not now. Instead, he managed a weak smile. "It's just the weather. We'll be fine once it clears." Claire looked unconvinced, but offered him a small nod. "I hope you're right." They sat together for a long while, the storm howling like a living creature outside, pressing against the old wooden walls as if trying to seep into the cabin itself. Mark eventually dozed off on the couch, lulled by the fire's crackle, but his sleep was shallow, filled with fragmented dreams of cold, of dragging noises, of hollow eyes carved into white faces. It wasn't until a faint creak stirred him awake that he realized someone was standing above him. Blinking through the dim firelight, he saw Ryan, peering down, his expression tense. "Mark," Ryan whispered, keeping his voice low, "have you seen Jason?" Mark rubbed his eyes, still groggy. "No, why?" Ryan's brows furrowed. "He's not in his bed, and his boots are gone." The weight of those words hit like a slab of ice. Jason had gone outside? In this storm? Mark immediately sat up. "How long ago?" "I don't know, maybe an hour? I thought he was just in the bathroom or something, but..." Ryan swallowed. The doors unlocked. Both men hurried to the front door. The cold hit them like a slap as they opened it slightly, snow swirling in vicious spirals beneath the porch light. Fresh footprints led away from the cabin, half covered by the rapidly falling snow. They vanished into the black wall of trees. Ethan appeared behind them, already pulling on his coat. "What the hell is going on?" "Jason's gone," Mark said, grabbing his boots. Claire and Emily came rushing down the stairs, alarmed by the commotion. "Wait!" Mr. Anderson's voice cut through the rising panic. He stepped forward, eyes scanning the blizzard outside. "We can't go after him blindly. We'll lose ourselves in this storm." "But Jason's out there!" Ryan's voice cracked. Mark's heart pounded. The storm was too intense, the cold too sharp. Even 20 feet from the cabin, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Anderson exhaled deeply, his breath forming clouds. "We'll tie ropes to the porch post. It'll keep us anchored as far as the line reaches. No further. Understand?" Reluctantly, they agreed. Minutes later, Mark, Ryan, Ethan, and Mr. Anderson ventured into the blizzard. Each secured by thick climbing rope, knotted at the porch. They moved cautiously, calling Jason's name over the shrieking wind. The world beyond the cabin was a swirling nightmare. Snow whipped across their faces, stinging like tiny needles. Every shadow looked like a lurking figure. Every gust of wind mimicked distant voices. They pushed forward, following the faint trail of prints until they abruptly ended, as if Jason had simply vanished into thin air. "No way," Ethan muttered, shining his flashlight in frantic arcs. Mark squinted ahead, his pulse quickening. "There's nothing, no footprints, no sign of struggle." "It just stops." Ryan's voice broke into a desperate tremor. "This can't be happening." Before anyone could respond, a sharp, piercing sound sliced through the storm, a long, slow whistle carried by the wind. It was close. Anderson whipped his head around. "Everyone back, now!" They began retreating along the rope, but as Mark turned, his beam of light swept across the trees, illuminating something he wished he hadn't seen. About 20 yards ahead, partially hidden behind the swaying pines, stood another snowman, but this one was different. It was taller than before, much taller, nearly 8 feet high, its body elongated like stacked warped spheres of ice. Its stick-like arms extended to the ground unnaturally, and around its neck hung Jason's red scarf, fluttering faintly in the wind. The coal-black eyes stared blankly through the snow, but Mark could feel something behind them, and something watching, something alive. The storm raged like a living thing, thrashing against the cabin walls with howls that carried the weight of something ancient and hungry. Inside, the group gathered in tense silence, the air heavy with unspoken dread. Mark stared out through the frosted window, his breath leaving short bursts of fog on the glass. The clearing beyond was barely visible now, swallowed by the white curtain of snow. The snowman, or whatever it was, still stood motionless at the edge of the tree line, Jason's scarf twisting unnaturally in the wind like a waving signal from something that shouldn't exist. Claire wrapped her arms around herself, her voice low and shaking. "You're sure? It had his scarf?" Mark nodded without turning. "Same pattern, same color. Jason was wearing it when we arrived." Ethan, pacing behind him, ran his hand anxiously through his hair. "This is insane. Somebody's screwing with us, right? Some sick prank?" Mr. Anderson's face was pale but stern. His calm demeanor, the one that always reassured them back in high school, was now cracking under the pressure. "This isn't a prank," he said. "Not anymore." Ryan, sitting near the fire, had both hands gripping his knees so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His eyes stared blankly into the flames, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. "My brother's out there," he whispered. "In this, whatever this is." Silence swallowed the room again. An hour passed. 2. The storm didn't let up. Anderson finally spoke, his voice steady but grim. "If we go out again now, we won't make it far. We wait until first light. If the storm eases, we search again." "No," Ryan snapped, his voice rising. "We can't just sit here and do nothing." Mark stepped in gently. "We're not abandoning him, Ryan. We just need to stay alive to find him. If we go out blind, we could all end up lost." Ryan clenched his jaw, his body trembling with restrained fury, but said nothing more. Outside, the wind screamed louder, rattling the shutters like skeletal fingers trying to break through. Mark couldn't sleep. He sat up most of the night in the main room, the fire now reduced to soft, glowing embers. Claire had dozed off in a chair nearby, her breathing slow but restless. Every so often, Mark thought he heard something, not from inside the cabin, but outside. Faint sounds, a low whistle cutting through the wind, too steady and deliberate to be natural. The same whistle from before. At one point, he swore he saw a shadow shifting, just beyond the tree line, but when he strained his eyes to focus, there was nothing, only swirling snow. At dawn, the storm finally weakened. The light revealed a transformed world, a landscape of blinding white with thick drifts swallowing up much of the clearing. The ropes they had tied to the cabin for their previous search were now almost completely buried. Anderson gathered everyone in the main room. "Gear up. We search as far as we safely can. Ropes stay attached. No one goes offline." "Understood." There were murmured acknowledgments, but the mood was heavy. Fear was a thick fog clinging to every word. The search party set out once more. This time, only Mark, Ryan, Anderson, and Ethan braved the cold. Claire and Emily stayed behind, tending the fire and preparing supplies. As they trudged forward, the world seemed silent in its desolation, save for the crunch of boots and snow and the soft whine of wind slicing between trees. The tracks from the night before had long since vanished. The storm had devoured every trace. They extended the rope further this time, reaching a grove of pines where the clearing thinned slightly. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the forest became, the trees standing like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with snow. Then Mark saw it. Ahead, nestled between two massive pines, was another snowman. Only this time, it was different. Its form was grotesquely tall, nearly 9 feet. Its body segments were no longer rounded but stretched, sagging under uneven weight. Thin, twig-like arms hung unnaturally low, nearly dragging along the snow-covered ground. Around its base were faint reddish stains, like diluted blood frozen into the surrounding ice, and in its twisted, grinning face, where coal eyes should have been, were 2 dark hollows far deeper than before. As though they weren't made of coal at all, but of something darker, something sunken. A scarf hung loosely from one of its arms. Jason's other scarf, the one his brother had packed for him as a spare. Ryan's breath hitched audibly behind him. "Oh God." Anderson immediately stepped between them. "Stay focused. Don't approach it. Don't touch anything." Mark felt his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. There was something deeply wrong about the figure, a primal wrongness that made his skin crawl. Ethan cursed under his breath. "What the hell is this thing doing out here? Someone's playing sick games, man." Mark shook his head. This isn't a person. This is something else. The group stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether to continue or turn back. Then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, the whistle came again, clearer this time. Closer. Long, drawn out, like someone exhaling through clenched teeth. Me-me-oh! Ryan spun around, panic rising in his voice. That's him! Jason! No, Anderson shouted sharply. It's not. But, Ryan protested. Anderson cut him off, his voice cold and commanding. That's not your brother. Whatever it is, it wants you to think that. The whistle sounded again, mimicking Jason's voice faintly. Rhiannon! Mark's blood ran cold. His fingers instinctively tightened around the handle of the small hatchet Anderson had handed them before leaving the cabin. For a brief second, movement flickered in the corner of Mark's vision. A tall, pale figure gliding between the trees like wind-made flesh. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished into the swirling snow. Suddenly, Ryan broke free, lunging forward toward the sound. Jason! Ryan, stop! Mark yelled, yanking the rope taut. Anderson and Ethan scrambled to pull him back, their combined strength barely enough to restrain him as the whistle mocked them again from the void. With great effort, they dragged Ryan back to the relative safety of the rope's limit. Don't listen to it, Anderson panted, locking eyes with Ryan. It's not him. Do you hear me? It's not him. Ryan collapsed to his knees, sobbing into the snow. Mark looked back once more into the forest, and for the briefest of moments, beneath the thick curtain of falling snow, he saw what could only be described as a silhouette, humanoid, but impossibly tall and thin. Its arms swayed unnaturally long at its sides, and above its shoulders, a head twisted at an unnatural angle, as though snapped and inverted. Its hair, or what resembled hair, stuck out in wild, frozen clumps. The eyes were wrong. They weren't eyes at all, just two perfect, hollow, white circles glowing faintly against the gloom. The group staggered back toward the cabin, the wind fighting them with every step, as if trying to pull them deeper into the woods. The rope was their only salvation, a thin, trembling lifeline leading them back from the maw of the storm. Ryan's sobs had quieted, replaced by a hollow, vacant stare. Anderson stayed close to him, gripping his shoulder with a firm hand, while Mark led the way, the rope burning against his gloved palms. The thing in the woods. It hadn't followed, or at least not openly, but Mark could feel its presence, watching, waiting. When they finally burst through the cabin door, the warmth hit them like a tidal wave. Claire and Emily jumped up from their seats, their eyes wide with anticipation. Did you find him? Claire asked breathlessly. Mark shook his head, too exhausted to speak. Ryan collapsed into a chair by the fire, his face pale and expressionless. Anderson pulled off his frost-covered jacket, his voice grim. We found something, but not Jason. He gestured to Ethan, who placed Jason's second scarf on the table, still dusted with frost but unmistakable. Claire brought her hands to her mouth, stifling a gasp. God. Emily's voice was barely audible. Then where is he? No one answered. The only sound was the dull thud of snow slamming against the cabin walls, and the distant, haunting whistle still lingering in Mark's mind. Hours passed as the storm settled into a steady rhythm of wind and swirling snow. The group sat close to the fireplace, not speaking much, each lost in their own spiral of fear. Anderson stared into the flames. We'll keep searching, but we can't go in blind again. Mark spoke softly. It mimicked his voice. Everyone looked toward him. In the woods, Mark continued. That whistle. It was using his voice to lure us deeper. Emily's face twisted with dread. You mean like a predator? Anderson nodded grimly. Exactly like one. Claire's voice trembled as she spoke. But what is it? The question hung in the air like thick smoke. No one dared answer. Later that evening, as darkness swallowed the world once more, Claire quietly approached Mark, who stood near one of the windows, peering out into the endless white. You saw it, didn't you? She whispered. Mark exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the glass. I don't even know how to describe it. Try. Mark swallowed hard. It was tall, thin. Its head was wrong, bent, like it had been twisted backward. Its arms, too long, and the eyes, white, hollow, like holes. Claire shivered visibly. You've heard the stories, haven't you? She asked after a moment. Mark glanced at her. About White Pine. Yeah. Just old folklore? No. She shook her head. Older than that. She lowered her voice even further, almost afraid to speak the words aloud. The wraith that harvests flesh. Mark blinked. He'd heard scraps of the tale from locals years ago, half-drunk whispers in Aspen Creek's lone dive bar, but never thought much of it. It was always just campfire nonsense. But now the words felt heavier. Claire continued, her voice trembling. My grandfather, he was Blackfeet. He told me about it when I was little, about something ancient that lives in these forests. It doesn't kill like an animal. It harvests, uses what it takes. Flesh, bone, even memories. Mark felt a chill crawl up his spine. Colder than the blizzard outside. It uses their voices, Claire added softly, so their families will come looking. Suddenly, there was a loud bang against the back of the cabin. Sharp, deliberate, as though something heavy had struck the wall. Everyone jumped to their feet. What the hell was that? Ethan hissed, grabbing the hunting rifle Anderson had unpacked earlier. Mark peered through the nearest window but saw nothing. Only swirling snow, reflecting the faint moonlight. Then came a second noise, this time from the roof. A dragging, scraping sound like frozen claws sliding across the wooden shingles. Emily whimpered. It's here! The group huddled together as Anderson chambered around into the rifle, his eyes darting toward the front door. No one dared move. Then, silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Even the wind seemed to stop. Suddenly, from the front porch, came a sound they'd been dreading most. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the wooden door. Knock, 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 followed by a familiar voice calling from outside. Ryan, it's me, Jason, open up! Ryan's breath caught in his throat. His legs twitched as though ready to run for the door, but Mark grabbed his arm tightly. No, Mark whispered. Don't you dare. But that's his voice, Ryan pleaded, eyes glassy with desperate hope. Mark shook his head. That's not him. Outside, the voice called again, softer this time. Please, Ryan, I'm so cold. The voice cracked and whimpered, perfectly imitating Jason's pleading tone, the kind of voice no brother should ever be able to ignore. Emily started sobbing softly. Ethan raised the rifle, pointing it toward the door, as though expecting it to burst open at any second. The voice came once more. Please, let me in. I can't feel my hands. Then came another knock. Louder. Bang! The cabin shook, and then dead silence again. Everyone stood frozen, staring at the door, waiting for whatever was on the other side to make its next move. That's when Mark noticed it. Outside the window, barely visible in the moonlit snow. Another snowman, larger than before, closer than before, its hollow eyes locked directly toward him. The sun struggled to rise behind a thick blanket of gray clouds, offering little warmth and even less light. Snowflakes continued their descent, like ash from a sky that refused to open fully. The storm had passed, but in its wake, it left behind an oppressive silence that pressed down on the cabin as though the weight of the woods themselves had settled upon them. Inside, nobody had slept. The night's events hung heavy in the air. Jason's voice outside the door, the knocking, the impossible imitation. And now, in the early light, another snowman stood even closer to the cabin, its malformed head slightly tilted, as though observing them with some cruel curiosity. Mark sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. His eyes were bloodshot, but his mind raced far too fast for exhaustion to claim him. Claire sat nearby, clutching a folded blanket like armor against something unseen. Emily paced anxiously back and forth, wringing her hands. Ethan checked the rifle again and again, as if the simple mechanical clicks might offer some illusion of control. Mr. Anderson stood at the window, eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a thin line. "We need to do something," Emily whispered finally, breaking the silence. "We can't just sit here anymore." Anderson turned, his voice low but steady. "I agree. The longer we wait, the more vulnerable we are. If it's hunting us, sitting still won't make us safe." Ryan looked up from the corner where he'd been sitting like a statue. "Jason's still out there." Mark exhaled slowly. "Ryan, we don't know that." "You didn't hear him like I did." Ryan's voice cracked with desperation. "That was his voice." "No," Mark said firmly. "That thing was using his voice." Anderson nodded grimly. "We've seen enough to know this isn't something we can reason with. But we still have a chance to find answers and maybe even find Jason before this thing picks us off one by one." Anderson laid out the plan quickly. They would split into 2 search teams again, but this time they would push further. The ropes would still anchor them to the cabin, but the teams would cover opposite directions, hoping, perhaps, to corner the thing, or at least learn more about what they were facing. Mark, Claire, and Anderson would head east, toward the river bend Anderson had mentioned seeing on old maps. Ethan, Ryan, and Emily would move west, toward a narrowing valley where older hunting trails once crisscrossed. Each team would carry 1 rifle, 1 flare gun, and radios. "This will be dangerous," Anderson said, leveling his gaze at them. "We don't separate from our teams, we stay within sight, and if anyone sees anything unnatural, we pull back immediately." Everyone agreed. There was no bravado anymore, only survival. By mid-morning, both groups stepped outside into the brittle cold, secured to the thick safety ropes that trailed back into the cabin. The world was deathly quiet. Only the crunch of boots and the occasional sharp gust of wind accompanied their journey. Mark led his team carefully through the east trail, his eyes darting between the trees. The snow beneath their feet was pristine, untouched since the storm, except for the occasional broken branches or shallow impressions that hinted at something having moved through earlier. The deeper they went, the more claustrophobic the woods became. The towering pines leaned in, their snow-laden branches forming oppressive canopies that dimmed the already weak daylight. Claire walked close behind him, her breath puffing rhythmically in the air, while Anderson trailed in the rear, ever watchful. After about 20 minutes of slow progress, they found it. Another snowman, but this one was different again. It stood at the edge of a narrow clearing, half shielded by a fallen tree. Its body was grotesquely asymmetrical, as though melting yet frozen in midsex. Its lower section bulged unnaturally, resembling more a heap of flesh beneath a snowy shell than any typical snowman. And in its chest cavity, half buried, was something dark. Cloth. Mark carefully stepped forward, ignoring Claire's whispered protest. As he approached, the cloth became clear, a piece of Jason's jacket, torn, stained with something dark, and frozen solid. Mark's stomach twisted. Anderson approached carefully from behind, his breath slow and controlled. "This thing, it's using them," Mark whispered almost to himself. "Like building blocks." Claire covered her mouth in horror. The realization was far worse than any wild theory they had entertained. This creature wasn't just killing, it was consuming, incorporating what it harvested into its own growing mass. As Mark examined the distorted snowman, something else caught his attention. Embedded in the snow around its base were shards, small blackened fragments. At first glance they resembled coal, but as Mark knelt closer he realized they weren't. The texture was wrong, softer, slightly gelatinous even in the cold. He gingerly picked one up with gloved fingers, feeling its strange consistency. Not coal, not stone. And then it clicked. The same strange blackened substance they had found on Jason's bed. Flesh, burned, frozen, decomposing. Claire let out a choked gasp. "Oh God!" Suddenly, their radios crackled to life. Ethan's panicked voice blared through the static. Mark! Mark, can you hear me? Mark fumbled with his radio, pressing the button. We hear you. What's going on? Ethan's voice came rapid, disjointed, filled with terror. Emily, she's gone. She was right behind us, and now she's gone? Mark's chest tightened. What do you mean, gone? I don't know, Ethan shouted, his breath hitching audibly through the transmission. We turned a corner. She was there, and then she wasn't. No footprints, no sound, nothing. The radio crackled again before Ethan's voice returned, quieter now, filled with dread. There's another one here, another snowman. It has her hat. For a moment, nobody spoke. The woods around them seemed to close in tighter, as though aware of the growing terror within its prey. Anderson's jaw clenched. We have to regroup, now. Mark nodded, his pulse thudding in his ears. We're pulling back, he relayed into the radio. Head back to the cabin. Stay on the rope. As they began the retreat, Mark glanced back one last time at the grotesque snowman behind them. In the dim light, it almost seemed to move, as if something beneath its frozen shell shifted slightly, breathing. The three of them moved as quickly as the snowdrifts allowed, their safety rope tugging gently behind like a lifeline straining against an unseen pull. Every tree, every gust of wind felt alive, watching, whispering. Mark's breathing became shallow under the suffocating silence, the events unfolding too fast for his mind to fully absorb. Jason was still missing. Now Emily had vanished, and whatever was stalking them wasn't merely hunting. It was playing. Claire stumbled behind him, nearly falling into a deep pocket of snow, but Mark caught her by the arm, steadying her. Stay close, he whispered, though his own voice betrayed his nerves. Mr. Anderson, still remarkably calm despite the horror around them, kept scanning the tree line, the rifle gripped tight in his gloved hands. His eyes darted constantly, reading every shadow, every flicker of movement. I don't like this, Claire said softly, her voice barely audible over the crunch of their boots. It's too quiet, like the storm took all the sound away with it. Mark nodded. He felt it too. The wind had calmed almost completely. No birds, no distant cracking branches, just emptiness. As they neared the cabin's clearing, something caught Mark's eye, just beyond the bend. A shape, another snowman, but this one was different yet again. The snowman stood only yards from the cabin now, towering over the others they had seen before. Its base was lopsided, as if hastily constructed, and the top section, the head, seemed less like a sphere of snow and more like an oddly shaped chunk of ice with something trapped inside. Mark squinted, his stomach turning. Pressed beneath a thin layer of ice was something dark. A clump of hair frozen into the surface, strands twisting like brittle black wires inside a glassy tomb. Claire saw it too, and immediately clutched Mark's arm, her breath catching in horror. That's Emily's hair. Anderson's face darkened as he lowered the rifle slightly, speaking through gritted teeth. It's incorporating them faster now. Mark swallowed hard, like it's getting stronger. Anderson nodded grimly. The more it feeds, the more complete it becomes. The radio on Mark's belt crackled again, Ethan's voice breaking through with frantic static. We're almost back, 10 meters away, but it's not letting us get closer. Mark raised the radio. What do you mean? There's another one, Ethan shouted. It's standing directly in the path, between us and the cabin, and it's not still anymore. It's moving, Mark. It's watching us move. Mark felt his heart sink. Hold position. Don't approach it. But Ethan's voice trembled. Ryan's panicking. I don't think I can hold him back if a sudden, sharp snap of static cut him off mid-sentence. Ethan, Mark barked into the radio. Ethan, nothing but static. Anderson's voice was sharp, immediate. We have to reach them, now. Without hesitation, they advanced, pulling on the frozen rope that tethered both teams. The tension in the line suggested the others were still connected, still close. Snow crunched violently beneath their boots as they rounded the cabin's side, hearts hammering against their chests. That's when they saw it. Just ahead, in the center of the clearing, Ethan stood frozen, both physically and emotionally. His rifle dangled uselessly in one hand, his mouth slightly open in a silent gasp. A few feet beyond him, Ryan had fallen to his knees, his face buried in his hands, and in front of them stood the snowman. Only this time, it moved. Its head twitched unnaturally, tilting side to side in short, jerky motions. One of its elongated arms, more branch than limb, had extended fully downward, its thin fingers scraping across the icy surface, dragging a shallow line in the snow, like some grotesque ritual mark. Inside its semi-translucent body, shapes shifted, small dark masses swirling within the frozen shell, as though trapped souls or partially absorbed remains were suspended inside. Claire whimpered behind Mark while Anderson slowly raised his rifle, taking careful aim. "Don't shoot," Mark whispered. "Not yet." The thing hadn't advanced, not physically, but its hollow eye sockets were locked directly onto them, on all of them, absorbing every flinch, every breath. And then, impossibly, the voice returned. Jason's voice, soft at first. "Help me." It was coming directly from the snowman's frozen grin. The lips didn't move. There were no lips, but the sound was unmistakably human. "Please, I'm trapped. It's so cold." Ryan suddenly lifted his head, his eyes wild. "That's him. We have to help him." "No," Mark snapped. "It's a trick." Anderson stepped closer to Ryan, trying to steady him with one hand, but Ryan's panic had spiraled into something uncontrollable, a desperate, irrational need to act. "You don't understand," Ryan shouted, tears streaming down his face. "That's my brother." And without further warning, Ryan broke free, tearing off the rope around his waist and stumbling toward the towering snowman. "Ryan, no!" Mark screamed. Claire gasped, frozen in place. Ethan lunged to stop him, but slipped on the slick ice. As Ryan closed the gap, the snowman's arm jerked upward like a striking serpent. Its branch-like hand lashed outward, coiling around Ryan's waist in a motion that was far too fast, far too precise for something so large. There was no time to react. With a horrifying crunch, Ryan was yanked directly against its icy core. His scream was muffled instantly as his face pressed into the semi-frozen mass, into that awful churning interior filled with twisting shapes and twitching shadows. The thing began pulling him inside. Mark, Anderson, and Ethan could only watch helplessly as Ryan's struggling form was slowly absorbed, his outline disappearing beneath the ice, becoming yet another addition to its growing, shifting anatomy. And then, as suddenly as it had moved, it stopped. The arm retracted, the body stilled, the voice ceased. Only Ryan's torn jacket remained, fluttering gently in the wind at the base of the now even larger abomination. The silence after Ryan's disappearance was unbearable. Not a single word had been spoken as Mark, Anderson, Claire, and Ethan stood there in the clearing, staring at the grotesque snowman that had just consumed another one of them. The towering structure pulsed faintly, as though it was breathing, an abomination growing with every life it claimed. The wind stirred Ryan's shredded jacket at its base. The crimson fabric stood out sharply against the pallid white like a flag marking a grave. Claire whimpered softly, clutching Mark's arm. Her nails dug into his jacket sleeve as she fought the scream rising in her throat. Anderson lowered his rifle, his jaw tight, his face stone cold. But Mark saw it in his eyes, pure helplessness. Even he, the steady rock of their group, was nearing the edge. Ethan was the first to break the quiet, his voice trembling, barely audible. What is this thing?" Mark swallowed the lump in his throat, forcing himself to speak. "It's not just killing them. It's absorbing them, using them." Anderson exhaled sharply through his nose, glancing at the grotesque monolith of flesh, snow, and bone. "The snow, the coal, all of it, it's not decoration. It's remains." The words felt heavier spoken aloud. Without another word, Anderson motioned them back toward the cabin. The rope still tethered them loosely, sagging like exhausted lifelines in the snow. The march back was agonizing. Every step was accompanied by the sensation of being watched. The creature didn't follow. It didn't have to. Its presence hovered in the air itself, as though the woods were infused with its breath. When they finally reached the cabin and slammed the door shut behind them, the emotional dam broke. Claire collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan dropped into one of the wooden chairs, head buried in his hands. Anderson simply stood by the door, his shoulders rising and falling as his composure finally began to fracture. Mark stood by the window, staring out toward where the snowman loomed, just out of sight beyond the swirling flurries. His fingers trembled, though whether from the cold or terror, he couldn't tell anymore. Minutes passed before anyone spoke again. It was Anderson who finally broke the silence. "We're dealing with something older than any of us, older than these woods. It isn't just hunting, it's building itself." Mark nodded weakly. "Claire told me something earlier, about the old legend." At his mention of her name, Claire looked up, tears streaking her face. Her voice was barely stronger than a whisper. "My grandfather called it the wraith that harvests flesh." Anderson's gaze sharpened. "It mimics, it lures, it feeds on the bodies and souls of those it takes." Claire's voice cracked. "It becomes them." Ethan looked up, pale, voice shaking. "But how do we fight something like that?" No one had an answer. Mark ran a hand down his face, trying to organize his thoughts. "It's not bound by the rules of any natural predator. It doesn't hunt for hunger. It harvests for completion." Anderson slowly sat down across from him. "And the more it absorbs, the less human it becomes. Every snowman we've seen wasn't built by hands, it was grown. A stage of its transformation." Mark's voice darkened. "And it's almost complete now." Claire wiped her eyes, forcing herself to speak. "If it keeps going, will it come for all of us?" Anderson didn't hesitate. "It already is." Nightfall returned too quickly, and with it the oppressive blackness. But tonight was different. The wind was gone. The blizzard had finally ceased, leaving behind an unnatural stillness. No more howling winds, no more whistling voices, just cold. Endless cold. Mark peered out the front window, scanning the frozen landscape. The snowdrifts had grown tall, obscuring much of the surrounding forest. But there, on the edge of the clearing, he saw it. Another snowman. Closer, bigger. The body was grotesquely wide now, as if packed with rising matter underneath. Thin cracks veined its icy surface, and faint pulsing shadows moved inside. Through the distorted glaze of semi-thermal ice, Mark could make out something that froze his blood. An arm. Not a branch, not a stick. A human arm, pale and stiff, fused within the snowman's mass like a trapped relic. Claire stepped up behind him and gasped when she saw it. "It's not just outside anymore," she whispered. "It's closing in." Mark clenched his jaw. It's not satisfied yet. Later that night, Anderson gathered them around the dining table. The oil lamp flickered between them, casting long shadows across the log walls. "We need to consider our options," Anderson said grimly. "Staying here isn't survival, it's surrender." Mark nodded. "But where can we go? It controls the woods. It's everywhere." Ethan's voice was dry, bitter. "If we stay, we die. If we leave, it follows. Great odds." Anderson leaned forward, voice quiet but intense. "I believe it's bound to the woods. I believe it has roots here, perhaps literally. Its range may be large, but not infinite. If we can make it to the ranger station to the south, we may be outside its direct hunting ground." Claire's voice trembled. "That's 4 miles away." Anderson met her gaze. "More miles. Or death." Silence again. Finally, Mark spoke. "Win." Anderson's eyes burned with resolve. First light. As the group dispersed to rest, though none truly slept, Mark remained by the window long after. And then he saw something new. From the edge of the woods, it emerged. no longer hiding behind its crude snowman shells, to the creature itself. At first glance, it resembled a man, towering and impossibly thin, its spine twisted like a broken tree. Its arms dangled well past its knees, ending in sharpened root-like appendages. Tufts of frozen, matted hair spiraled wildly from its distorted skull, which was half-verted at the jaw. Two white, hollow circles glowed faintly from where its eyes should have been, and on its chest, stretched beneath the translucent layers of frost and skin, were visible shapes fused into its torso. Pieces of Jason, Emily, Ryan, a patchwork of victims. Mark stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat, unable to look away, and then the creature's head twitched suddenly, snapping upright. Its hollow eyes locked directly onto him. The moment their eyes met, those hollow, glowing sockets fixing on him, Mark felt as if his soul were being drawn out through his chest. The creature didn't move, didn't charge, but somehow its presence alone paralyzed him with a fear so raw it bordered on suffocation. The glass fogged beneath Mark's rapid, panicked breathing as he staggered backward, clutching at the wooden wall for balance. Claire's voice broke through the haze. "Mark, what is it? What do you see?" He couldn't speak for several seconds. His tongue felt thick, his throat constricted, as though the very air had turned into a dense fog pressing down on him. Finally, with a hoarse whisper, he managed, "It's here." Claire stiffened, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the edge of the nearby table. "What do you mean, here?" Mark shook his head, still breathless. "No more snowmen. No more games. It's showing itself now." Moments later, Anderson and Ethan appeared from the back room, both armed and tense. "Talk to me," Anderson ordered. Mark pointed toward the window, his voice steadying just enough to get the words out. "It's watching. It knows we're leaving tomorrow," Ethan cursed under his breath. "Like hell we're waiting until morning. We move now." But Anderson shook his head sharply. "No, if we leave in the dark, we'll walk right into its jaws. It wants us desperate. It's cornering us. At least with daylight we can navigate, see the paths, make it to the station." Ethan looked unconvinced, but said nothing further, pacing the cabin like a caged animal. Claire's voice cracked as she whispered, "It's not going to let us leave, is it?" Mark didn't answer, but they all knew the truth. The rest of the night passed slowly, every tick of Anderson's old camping watch hammering like a countdown to judgment. Nobody dared sleep. Even breathing felt dangerous, as though exhaling too loudly might invite the thing to break through the walls. Occasionally, Mark thought he heard faint scraping along the outside logs, like thin fingers tracing their prison, measuring its seams. Twice, Ethan swore he saw shadows shifting at the window, but nothing appeared when they dared peek outside. Anderson kept the rifle across his lap the entire night, never lowering it even as his eyes burned with exhaustion. Finally dawn, if it could even be called that. The gray light that filtered through the clouds was dim and thin, casting a pale glow that offered little comfort. But to the group, it was enough, a fragile thread of hope in an ever-tightening noose. Anderson stood first, addressing the group. "This is it. We move fast, light and focused, no stopping. If we're separated, head for the ranger station." Mark nodded, checking his pack and tightening the makeshift harness that secured his gear. Claire stood beside him, trembling slightly but determined. "I'm not leaving your side," she whispered. "You won't have to," Mark promised, though deep inside, he wasn't sure he could keep that vow. They stepped out into the clearing. The cold immediately bit into their exposed skin like sharpened teeth, but none of them flinched. The terror gnawing at their minds far outweighed any physical discomfort. And then they saw it. Where there had once been a crude snowman, now stood the creature itself in full form, no longer bound to its frozen shells. The towering figure shifted as they emerged, standing at the tree line like a sentinel. Its elongated limbs hung slack, fingertips brushing the snow. Its head cocked slightly, unnatural and twitching in sharp, unsettling bursts. Flesh, ice, and wood had merged into something grotesquely unified, pulsing faintly beneath its translucent skin. Faces, half-formed and frozen, shifted within its torso like trapped souls, eyes wide and mouths stretched in silent screams. Jason, Emily, Ryan, all visible inside. Claire gasped audibly beside Mark. "My God." Anderson raised his rifle but didn't fire. His voice was hoarse but controlled. "Keep moving." The group circled wide, staying as far from the creature's reach as possible, but never turning their backs. Every step forward felt like wading through a nightmare. And then the sound returned. The whistle. But this time, it was no longer Jason's voice. It was all of them. The voices of the missing merged into a grotesque chorus, calling out in perfect, sickening harmony. "Help us! Mark! Claire! Please!" Mark's stomach lurched, his legs nearly buckled. The thing was mimicking them all now, stitching their identities together, twisting their voices into its bait, closing the distance between them before the creature smacked into the air. The gunshot echoed sharply, momentarily silencing the voices, but the creature didn't flinch. Then it moved, slowly, deliberately. One massive leg shifted forward, crunching through the deep snow as it advanced, closing the gap. Anderson barked, "Run!" They bolted toward the trail leading south, the snow swallowing their legs with each frantic step. The creature followed, but it didn't charge. It didn't need to. Its towering form glided behind them, following like death itself. Slow, patient, inevitable. After what felt like endless running, they finally spotted the faint outline of the old snowball shed near the ranger outpost. A dilapidated structure, half buried in snow, but still intact. They reached the shelter and slammed the heavy wooden door behind them, bracing it with whatever debris they could find inside. Inside the shed, the stench of old gasoline and mildew filled their lungs. It was dark, but they could make out the hulking shape of the snowmobile under a tarp. Anderson wasted no time pulling off the cover. "This is our only shot." Ethan scrambled to check the fuel. "Quarter tank left." Mark nodded. "It'll have to be enough." But then, something struck the outside wall. A heavy, deliberate thud. Thump. And again. Thump. The shed trembled with each impact. And then came the whistle once more, rising from outside like a banshee's song. "You can't run." The creature was at the door. And this time, it wasn't playing. The heavy wooden door of the shed shuddered again as another violent impact rattled its hinges. Snow rained down from the rafters, shaken loose with each pounding thud from the thing outside. The creature was no longer circling. It had found them, cornered them, and now it was testing their defenses. Claire gasped as splinters flew from the door frame. "It's going to break through!" Ethan frantically worked at the snowmobile's engine, his fingers trembling with each turn of the wrench. Just a few more seconds. Mark could hear his own heart hammering in his ears. The creature's hollow whistle pulsed in rhythm with every slam against the door. Like a cruel countdown. "You can't escape. You can't escape." The snow outside had turned into a solid wall, pressing against the structure. The blizzard might have eased, but now the snow itself was closing in, as if nature had conspired with the monster to trap them fully. Anderson stood near the door, his breath steady, his rifle gripped tightly in his hands. He hadn't spoken since they'd entered. His eyes remained locked on the quivering frame of the door. As though calculating every strike, every second they had left, Mark knelt beside Ethan, checking the fuel line. "Do we have enough?" Ethan nodded quickly. "It'll get us out of the woods, if we can get it started." Anderson finally spoke, his voice calm but sharp. "You won't all make it if you wait any longer." Mark froze. "What are you talking about?" Another impact shook the shed, louder this time. A thin crack spread down the center of the door like lightning on old wood. Anderson turned, looking each of them in the eyes. "It's drawn to movement, sound. If it thinks we're still inside, you might have a chance." Claire's face went pale. "No!" He raised a hand. "If one of us has to stay behind, let it be me." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of his words pressed down heavier than the snow itself. Mark shook his head, his voice hoarse. No, we stick together. Anderson's gaze softened, but his tone remained firm. You saw what it's capable of. You know as well as I do that hesitation is death. If you hesitate now, Claire and Ethan won't make it out of this forest. Another thunderous bang split the air as one of the hinges snapped from the door. Ethan flinched but kept working. I've almost got it. Anderson stepped forward, placing a hand on Mark's shoulder. This isn't about sacrifice, Mark. It's about giving you a chance to live. I brought you kids out here. This is my responsibility. Mark's throat tightened painfully. We'll find another way. There isn't one. Suddenly, a final blow knocked the door completely free from its frame. It crashed inward with a deafening crack, slamming against the far wall. Freezing air burst into the shed as the thing stood in the opening. Its full form filled the doorway. The creature was larger than before, its swollen, twisted body flexing with unnatural rhythm. Its translucent flesh writhed, revealing glimpses of the faces trapped beneath the ice-like skin. Jason, Emily, Ryan, all flickering like images caught behind frosted glass. Its head twisted sharply, scanning the room. The hollow white eyes locked directly on them. And then, it stepped inside. Without hesitation, Anderson leveled the rifle and fired. The deafening boom of the shotgun blast echoed like thunder within the shed. Fragments of frozen flesh shattered off the creature's shoulder, spraying shards of ice and sinew across the floor. But it didn't stop. The thing lurched forward, one massive limb swiping sideways. Anderson rolled aside, narrowly avoiding being crushed. Mark grabbed Claire by the arm. Go! Ethan pulled the starter on the snowmobile. The engine coughed, sputtered, and finally roared to life. Claire climbed onto the back seat as Mark jumped behind the controls, gripping the handlebars tight. Anderson fired again, this time striking the creature's leg. Another explosion of frozen debris filled the air, but still the monster advanced. It was buying them seconds. Nothing more. As Mark revved the snowmobile, Anderson shouted over the roar. Don't stop until you're out of the forest. Follow the old service trail south. Don't look back. Mark met his eyes one last time. Come with us. But Anderson shook his head, a sad, knowing smile on his face. Get them out. That's all that matters. With a final squeeze of the throttle, the snowmobile burst forward, smashing through the loose debris blocking the shed's rear entrance. The machine rocketed into the snowy expanse beyond, leaving the cabin and Anderson behind. Claire clung tightly to Mark's waist, her sobs lost in the wind as they sped through the narrow trail cut between ancient pines. Behind them, they could still hear the muffled echoes of gunfire. 2 shots, then one final scream. Then, nothing. The snowmobile careened through the twisting paths, narrowly dodging low-hanging branches and half-buried rocks. The snow beneath the treads kicked up in thick waves, nearly blinding them, but Mark didn't slow down. Every second mattered now. The creature wasn't far behind. Through the rearview mirror, Mark caught fleeting glimpses of it, gliding between the trees, its elongated limbs bending unnaturally as it moved. It was faster than it had ever shown before, closing the distance effortlessly. The trail narrowed ahead, the forest thickened, and then, as they broke through a sharp curve, a new horror revealed itself. The old service bridge ahead, once used by the Rangers, had partially collapsed under the weight of recent snowfall. Only a thin, precarious strip of wooden planks remained. Mark's breath caught in his chest. Claire screamed, "Mark!" There was no time, no options. The narrow strip of remaining bridge looked barely wide enough for a man to cross on foot, let alone a speeding snowmobile carrying 2 people. On either side, the ravine plunged into darkness, the frozen river beneath now nothing more than jagged ice and fractured boulders waiting like open jaws. Claire screamed again behind him, "Mark, slow down!" But slowing down wasn't an option. The creature was closing in, weaving effortlessly through the trees, its elongated limbs slicing through snow-laden branches like paper. Its head twitched in unnatural jerks, its glowing hollow eyes locked directly onto them. Mark's knuckles whitened around the snowmobile's grips. His entire world narrowed to that collapsing bridge ahead, a deadly, narrowing path that might be their only shot at survival. "Hold on!" he shouted over the roar of the engine. The snowmobile slammed into the first plank, the machine bouncing wildly as it lurched onto the broken wooden structure. The treads fought for purchase, spraying loose snow and ice in violent bursts. Claire buried her face into Mark's back, screaming into his jacket. The entire bridge creaked under their weight, groaning like an ancient beast about to give out. The rear section of the bridge sagged dangerously as they sped across, a few boards snapping away and tumbling into the icy void below. The machine swerved left, right, fighting the instability. For a moment, Mark thought the treads were going to slide off completely, but with a desperate counterpull, he corrected their path just enough to keep them centered. The far edge was only 20 feet away now, 15, 10, and then a deafening crack. The plank beneath the left tread shattered, dropping one side of the snowmobile downward sharply. Claire screamed as the machine tilted sideways, the left ski now hanging over the ravine's open mouth. Mark gritted his teeth, jerking the handlebars hard to the right, pouring every ounce of strength he had into stabilizing the vehicle. The machine skidded forward on the remaining plank, a terrifying, lurching crawl that felt like skating across glass. The engine whined desperately beneath them as the final stretch approached. 5 feet. 3. With a final desperate burst of speed, the snowmobile leapt off the last board, slamming down into the snowbank on the far side. The rear treads dug into the soft powder, nearly throwing both of them off, but Mark held firm, guiding the machine into a rough but stable landing. They had made it across. For now. Mark let out a gasp, his body trembling from adrenaline. Claire clutched him tighter, sobbing into his back. "I thought we were—" She couldn't finish. "I know," Mark panted. "I know." He risked a glance back across the bridge. The creature had reached the edge now, towering over the shattered wooden remains, its pale form quivering in frustration. Its long fingers scraped along the remaining planks as though testing their strength. For several seconds it simply stood there, swaying like a tree in windless air. Then, suddenly, it screamed. The sound was not human. It was not even animal. It was a twisted cacophony of the voices it had absorbed, all erupting in agony at once. Jason, Emily, Ryan. Even Anderson's voice joined now, crying out in pain and rage from within its unnatural core. "Mark, Claire, you can't run. You belong to me." The echo of its scream rattled across the ravine, shaking loose snow from the trees above them. Mark swallowed, fighting the panic threatening to rise again. They didn't stop to watch it any longer. Every second counted. He throttled the snowmobile forward once more, following the faint trail leading south toward the ranger outpost. If they could reach it, if they could just get beyond the boundaries of the forest, they might finally escape this nightmare. The next mile passed in a blur of white. The path narrowed and twisted, the snow now knee-deep in places. Mark's vision blurred from exhaustion, his reflexes numb, but he forced himself forward. Every shadow along the trail seemed alive. Every gust of wind carried phantom whispers. Claire remained silent behind him, clutching tightly with eyes squeezed shut. But deep down, Mark knew the thing was still following. It didn't need to move fast anymore. It simply existed everywhere in this cursed forest. The trees, the ground, the snow itself, all part of its hunting grounds. And it was waiting for their next mistake. Fascinatingly, as they crested a small ridge, Mark saw it. The ranger outpost, half buried under snow but still standing, its tall radio antenna cutting through the gray sky like a final beacon of hope. Mark exhaled sharply, filled with brief relief. They were close, so close. But then, the trees ahead moved. No wind, no falling branches. The trees themselves shifted, bending outward unnaturally, as though making way for something approaching from beneath the snow. The ground ahead bulged suddenly, rippling as a mound of snow swelled like rising dough. Claire screamed. "Mark, look!" The snow ahead exploded upward. The creature burst forth from beneath the earth itself, no longer restrained by form or flesh. It had grown far larger, its body now a writhing mass of limbs, branches, and frozen human remains interwoven into a monstrous tapestry. Faces pressed against its semi-thorn-back skin like souls trapped beneath ice, their mouths locked in eternal screams. Its limbs cracked outward like spider legs, digging into the snow as it pulled its grotesque bulk fully into their path. It had cut them off. Mark slammed on the brakes, the snowmobile skidding sideways into a sharp stop. The monster loomed only yards away now, its hollow white eyes glowing brighter than ever. And then it spoke. Not a whisper, not a mimicry, but a unified, guttural voice made of all its victims combined. "Stay." The monster loomed in front of them, like a living monument to every nightmare they had endured. Its towering mass writhed and pulsed, fused together from snow, wood, ice, and flesh. Far more than a simple creature now. It was a cathedral of horror, a breathing, shifting memorial to every soul it had harvested. The patchwork faces pressed against its translucent skin twitched in agony, some mouthing silent screams, others frozen mid-beg for help. The broken voice that came from its core was no longer just mimicry. It was an amalgamation. Jason's voice blended into Emily's, layered beneath Ryan's tortured wails, and now, most recently, Mr. Anderson's desperate, rasping final words. "Stay with us, Mark. Stay." Mark's body locked up as a primal terror surged through him. His hands trembled on the snowmobile's handlebars, the engine still humming beneath him, ready to flee. If his legs would only move. Claire clutched him from behind, sobbing uncontrollably, her voice cracking against his ear. "Mark, we can't go through it. We're trapped." The towering mass shifted forward, one grotesque limb stretching out like a falling tree trunk, embedding itself into the snow mere feet ahead of them. The vibrations rippled through the ground beneath the snowmobile. For one brief moment, Mark's instincts screamed for surrender. It's too big, it's too fast, it's too close. But then something inside him pushed back, a defiant sliver of will that hadn't yet been consumed. Not yet. Mark twisted the throttle violently, forcing the snowmobile into reverse as the treads kicked up a storm of snow. The creature lunged forward, swinging its arm like a whip, barely missing the machine as Mark veered hard left, narrowly dodging the blow. The engine screamed in protest, but the machine responded, pulling them into a wide loop across the open field of snow that surrounded the ranger station. Claire gripped him tighter, burying her face against his back, trying to shut out the abomination's voices. But they pierced through her mind like shards of ice. "We leave. You belong here. You are part of us now." The creature lunged again, tearing through the snowbank and uprooting a nearby pine tree like it was a blade of grass. Mark's vision blurred, but his mind remained locked onto the only clear thought he had left: the outpost. If they could make it to the building, barricade themselves inside, they might have a final chance to signal for help. Assuming the old emergency radio still functioned, the snowmobile bounced violently as they crested another ridge, the outpost now less than 50 yards away. But the creature was faster. The ground behind them bulged once more as its grotesque limbs spidered across the terrain, closing the distance with terrifying speed. And then, a second monstrosity rose from the snow to their left. Mark's breath caught in his throat. A second one. Or perhaps another extension of the same being, splitting itself apart into multiple forms. This new horror was smaller, but equally malformed. Its body more serpentine, comprised almost entirely of twisting arms, fused together like a mass of reaching fingers. Its head was little more than a swollen lump of half-formed human faces, fused together, eyes half closed, some crying, some grinning. The two horrors closed the gap simultaneously, forcing Mark toward a narrow passage between two jagged stone outcroppings. "There!" Claire screamed, pointing. "The service tunnel." Mark saw it, a narrow emergency maintenance tunnel that led beneath the outpost's foundation, once used by rangers to store equipment or escape sudden storms. It was barely wider than the snowmobile itself. It was suicide. But it was their only chance. Without hesitation, Mark yanked the handlebars toward the opening. The snowmobile skidded sideways as they entered the tunnel, scraping violently against the stone walls, sparks flying from the contact. Claire ducked instinctively as shards of rock and ice pelted her face. The creatures howled behind them, too large to immediately follow. For a moment, a blessed moment, they were inside. The passage was tight, the walls closing in on either side as the snowmobile screeched forward, barely fitting through the narrowing gap. The only light came from the dim glow of Mark's headlamp, slicing thin beams into the darkness ahead. The sound of their breathing filled the confined space. Quick, shallow, terrified. Behind them, distant thuds echoed, deep, vibrating strikes as the creatures pounded at the stone walls, searching for alternate routes. Claire finally spoke through ragged breaths. "How long does this tunnel run?" Mark didn't know. "Long enough, I hope." He didn't tell her the truth, that the map Anderson had shown him was incomplete. The tunnel may lead directly beneath the outpost, or it may dead end, but there was no turning back. The passage began to widen, leading into an open underground storage chamber. Old wooden crates, rusted fuel drums, and decaying tools littered the cavern. At the far end stood a rusted iron ladder leading up toward the outpost's main floor. They had made it. For now, Mark slammed the snowmobile to a halt, cutting the engine. "Climb," he ordered. Claire scrambled off and ascended the ladder first, her frozen hands slipping as she gripped the icy rungs. Mark followed close behind, stealing one last glance down the tunnel behind him. The low hum of the creatures reverberated through the stone. They were still coming. Claire pushed open the heavy hatch door into the outpost's main building. Snow poured in from the sides, but the structure itself was intact. Barely. The main room was cold, dark, and silent, but the emergency backup generator hummed weakly in the corner. Mark pulled the hatch shut behind them, securing the lock. For the first time in what felt like forever, they were momentarily safe. The old emergency radio sat atop a metal desk, its power indicator blinking faintly. Claire rushed toward it, flipping switches, adjusting the dials. Please work." Mark moved to the frosted windows, peering out into the gray horizon. In the distance, through the wall of trees, he saw movement. The creatures had found another path, and they were coming. Claire's voice cut through his dread. "Mark, it's working. I'm getting a signal." A burst of static erupted from the radio speaker, followed by a crackling voice. "Ranger outposts, identify who's transmitting." "Over." Mark snatched the microphone. "This is Mark Dawson. We're at White Pine Ranger Outpost. Emergency. We need extraction. Repeat, immediate extraction." Static, then a faint, barely audible reply. "Copy. Sending team. 2 hours out. Hold position. Over." Mark lowered the mic slowly. 2 hours. 2 more hours. Outside, the trees trembled. The creatures had arrived. The transmission ended, leaving only the faint hum of the generator and the crackle of static filling the room. 2 hours. That might as well have been 2 years. Claire collapsed into one of the metal chairs, clutching her face in her hands, trembling. "We won't last 2 hours," she whispered. "It's here." Mark stood frozen at the window, watching the tree line beyond the outpost shudder unnaturally. The monsters were no longer hiding. They had fully emerged, towering above the trees like pale giants, their grotesque forms bending and twisting against the gray sky. The larger one, the first horror. The one that had consumed Jason, Emily, Ryan, and Anderson, led the way. Its long arms swept low across the snow, carving deep trenches as it advanced. The smaller one slithered behind like a malformed centipede, its coiled limbs writhing constantly. They were surrounding the outpost. They were closing the final circle. Mark forced himself to move, dragging a metal filing cabinet in front of one of the doors. The makeshift barricade wouldn't stop them, but it might slow them for a moment. Claire watched him, tears staining her pale cheeks. "Mark, we're not getting out of here, are we?" He stopped stacking debris for a moment, looking at her with raw honesty. "I don't know." There was no point in false hope anymore. The creatures began to circle the building, their movements unnaturally synchronized. The sound of their long limbs scraping against the metal siding of the outpost echoed through the small structure, each screech raising the hair on the back of Mark's neck. The hollow voices returned. "We're so close now. Let us in, Mark. Join us, Claire." The words were no longer desperate imitations. They carried weight, confidence, as if the monsters knew their victory was inevitable. Suddenly, the generator sputtered. The room dimmed for a heartbeat before the lights returned. Mark cursed under his breath. "If that generator dies, we lose the radio." Claire looked up at him with wide, panicked eyes. "What do we do?" Mark hesitated. His mind raced, weighing risks he never imagined he would have to face. The creature struck the outpost for the first time moments later. The impact was like an earthquake. The far wall bowed inward under the weight of one of the monstrosities pressing against it. Metal screamed as rivets popped loose. Snow and shards of wood rained from the ceiling. Claire shrieked and stumbled backward while Mark grabbed a nearby fire axe, gripping it with both hands even as his arms shook. The next blow came faster, collapsing part of the wall near the emergency hatch they had entered through. Freezing air poured inside as a massive pale limb shoved its way in, groping blindly for them. Claire grabbed a flare gun from the emergency kit, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. "Get back!" she screamed, firing the flare directly into the exposed limb. The flare struck the creature's flesh, exploding into blinding red light. The horror recoiled with a deafening shriek, retreating the limb in a violent jerk that shook the entire building. For a moment, there was silence again. Mark's heart pounded in his ears. "They feel pain," he muttered. "We can hurt it." Claire stared at the flare gun as if seeing it for the first time, her hands still shaking. "But we only have 2 more shots." Mark glanced at the emergency cabinet. 3 road flares remained. No gun, but open flames. He looked back at the open hole in the wall where freezing air whistled through the broken siding. "Maybe we don't have to kill it," he said. "Maybe we just have to hold it off." Another impact rocked the outpost, this time from the opposite wall. They were testing every angle now, probing for weaknesses. And then came the second voice, Anderson's voice, now fully absorbed and distorted. "You can't run, Mark. This is home now," Claire whimpered. "Make it stop. Please, make it stop." Mark gritted his teeth, fighting the suffocating dread that threatened to paralyze him. 2 hours, he whispered to himself. "We just have to survive 2 hours." The next attack was more aggressive. The ceiling above them buckled as one of the creatures tried to collapse the structure entirely. Large chunks of snow and debris rained down, forcing them both to scramble to the far corner. Claire fired a second flare upward into the ceiling as the pale flesh burst through. Another shriek filled the air, a horrible layered cry that vibrated through the outpost walls. Mark grabbed the remaining handheld flares, striking one to life. The bright orange glow filled the room. "Stay back," he shouted at the limb trying to force its way inside. For now, it hesitated. The fire slowed them, but Mark knew they were adapting. Minutes passed like hours. The walls groaned under the continuous assault. The creatures weren't simply attacking. They were toying with them, wearing them down, forcing panic to erode what little courage they had left. Mark's arms burned from exhaustion. His hands blistered from holding the flares so long. And then, the radio crackled again. "Ranger team, 10 minutes out. Hold. Position." Mark nearly dropped the flare from shock. "They're close," he gasped. Claire sobbed with relief, but was quickly cut off as another impact threw her to the ground. The largest creature forced a final breach. The front wall tore open completely as its upper torso wedged itself into the outpost, splitting beams and crushing the metal frame. Its hollow white eyes glowed from within the collapsing structure, fixating on them like a predator savoring its cornered prey. The chorus of voices returned louder than ever. "Mark, Claire, you're already ours!" Its massive limb unfurled toward them. Mark lit the final flare, raising it high. The flames danced violently, casting wild shadows across the abomination's writhing form. "Stay with me," Mark shouted at Claire as he prepared to make his last stand. And then, from the distance, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. The first gunshot. Searchlights beamed across the clearing as figures emerged from the forest. Heavily armed rescue rangers shouting commands into the frozen air. The cavalry had arrived. And that was the flesh that harvests snow. If you made it this far, thank you for braving the entire journey with us through the icy nightmare of White Pine Forest. Stories like these remind us that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones hiding in the dark, but the ones that wear the voices of those we love. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with fellow horror fans. Every comment, every share helps us continue bringing you more original horror stories based on urban legends, ritual horror, and the darkest corners of human imagination. And always remember, if you see a snowman standing alone in the woods where it shouldn't be, walk away. Some things aren't meant to be approached. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and stay out of the woods.